I was Luke Reed's most admired student. He often looked at the programs I wrote independently, sighing with admiration, praising me for my exceptional talent and a passion for mechanical intelligence that was incomparable to most. But only I knew the truth. I didn't like programming at all, and I hated machines even more. What I was truly interested in was him. I am a very stubborn person. Although my feelings for him came out of nowhere, once they started, I was unwilling to give up. Of course, I had tried confessing, but he just patted my head, treating me like a junior. Nora, you're still young. What do you know about love? You just haven't met the person who truly makes your heart race, so you're confusing admiration and liking. I was furious because I knew he was wrong. At the same time, I felt powerless, because no matter how I argued, I couldn't change his attitude. Graduation season was approaching, and I didn't have much time left. So I decided to try one last time. If it still failed, I would give up completely. For years, it felt short, yet also felt like half a lifetime. Thinking this, I poured half a glass of whiskey over my head without changing my expression, making such an astonishing gesture that it even scared the hooligan next to me. Babe, are you sure I won't get beaten up later? I started to get impatient. I'll pay you extra. The thug immediately beamed with delight. Oh, you're the best, boss. His face was so flattering and spineless it seemed to disgrace the full back tattoo. Could this really fool Luke? But I had no other choice, so I hardened my heart and threw back the rest of the whiskey. The high alcohol content made me frown in discomfort. And I wanted something else to chase it down, but then I saw the hooligan mouth the words, "He's here." I swiftly slumped onto the table, letting him grope me with a lecherous smirk. Looks like a college girl. Today's my lucky day, man. Let her go. As expected, Luke spoke up, playing the hero saving the damsel role according to the script I had written. As he held me and carried me out of the bar, I was so nervous my hands and feet were ice cold. It was because I still didn't know if his arrival tonight was out of a teacher's sense of duty, or if he felt a little something for me too. He took me back to his place. For the past 4 years, he had rigidly maintained the boundaries of a teacher-student relationship, never crossing the line, so this was my first time at his apartment. I leaned on the sofa, my nostrils filled with a fresh mint scent. He gently wiped my face and covered me with a blanket, preparing to leave. Afraid of missing the chance again, I used the alcohol as courage and wrapped my arms around his waist. The summer was too hot, and his clothes were light. Through his shirt, I could easily feel his abs. Even more, I could feel his whole body tremble the instant I hugged him. Be good, stop messing around. Just like always, he tried to coax me to let go, his tone unwavering and even carrying a hint of tolerance. But I suddenly felt defeated. I couldn't control my eyes welling up, and my body began to tremble with suppressed sobs. Noticing I was crying, the movement of him trying to pull away stopped. His distinct, bony hands hovered in the air for a long moment before he sighed and pulled them back, as if surrendering. I asked him, with a do-or-die attitude, if he truly didn't like me even a little. I told you, you're still young, and I'm a teacher, you're a student. I interrupted him, saying I had already graduated. He then said, but I'm too much older than you. Your future is bright, there's really no need to. I countered that he had no right to make decisions for me. He sighed, his voice so soft I could barely hear it. I had a failed 7-year relationship. I wouldn't be a good partner. Another rejection. Yet, I vaguely smelled a hint of hope. He seemed to offer many reasons, but he still hadn't answered my question. My heart rate quickened. I closed my eyes, stubbornly snuggling into his embrace, then tilted my head back and kissed his Adam's apple. The not-quite-dry whiskey on me soaked his chest. Along with the strong smell of evaporating alcohol, I could feel his whole body stiffen. His body was taut like a drawn bow, and his heart pounded like a drum, making my eardrums vibrate. His hand gripped my wrist tightly behind my back. It didn't feel like he was forcing me to let go, rather, it felt like he couldn't bear to let go. As if afraid I might escape. Having finally managed to get into his house by pretending to be drunk, my lips followed the clear line of his jaw upwards, his earlobe, eyelid, bridge of his nose, and then his lips. I could feel his breathing suddenly halt. The large hand holding my wrist tightened reflexively, and even his downward-facing eyelashes were trembling. But with just one touch, he jolted awake, opening his eyes and abruptly pulling back to create distance between us. He looked at me as if waking from a deep dream, then nervously averted his gaze. You've had too much to drink. You'll sleep here tonight. I'll go stay at the school. Watching him leave so decisively, it would be a lie to say I wasn't sad. But I didn't see that as soon as he stepped outside, he immediately dropped his cool facade. His entire body practically slumped against the wall, his forehead pressed against the cool door panel, utterly unable to control his emotions. Inside, my heart still hadn't calmed down. I had told myself to give up after this final attempt failed, but I just couldn't accept it. Loneliness and disappointment surged simultaneously. I suddenly wanted to indulge myself. Finally, I pulled out my phone and dialed that number. The person on the other end sounded surprised yet delighted, but I couldn't be bothered with pleasantries and just told him to come pick me up. Almost the instant I opened the car door, my phone rang. Luke's low voice was laced with worry. "Where are you going? What's it to you?" A few seconds of silence on the other end. "You're emotionally unstable right now. It's easy to act impulsively and make mistakes." I hung up on him immediately and got into the car, meeting the bewildered gaze of the man in the driver's seat. "Did you fight with someone? Do you need help? Just drive." "Oh, okay. Are you hungry? I can take you out to eat." I didn't even look up. "Take me to a hotel." The driver was startled, his voice panicked. "Nora, I don't mean that with you," I sneered, glancing sideways at him. "Nathaniel, stop pretending. Why are you playing at pure love at your age?" This man's name was Nathaniel Gray. We met in the library. I was dozing off with an introductory programming book when he suddenly came over and said I looked a lot like his first love. I laughed at his old-fashioned pickup line, not very politely, but he just pushed up his glasses and apologized good-naturedly. I gave him my contact information, and he began pursuing me. But he was truly clumsy. Even his pursuit felt tepid, afraid of causing me trouble, uninteresting, but not annoying either. "Forget it, a hotel is too much trouble. Let's just stay here." I got up from the passenger seat, straddled the center console into the driver's seat, and reached out to unbutton his shirt. He wore a white shirt almost every day. I even suspected he was an insurance agent. Nathaniel stared blankly at my actions until the third button was undone, when he finally realized I was serious. He panicked, frantically trying to stop me. "Wait, Nora, I'm really not the kind of person you think." He desperately covered his collar, looking like a little wife about to be taken advantage of. Annoyed by his lack of cooperation, I exasperatedly demanded, "What is wrong with you? Do you want this or not?" He shook his head vigorously, his ears bright red, but I could distinctly feel that he was aroused. I simply steeled myself and began unbuttoning my own shirt. Nathaniel was terrified and pushed me back into the passenger seat. But the next second, the car door was yanked open, and Luke punched Nathaniel squarely in the face, dragging him out of the car. Nathaniel's nose was bleeding, and his glasses flew off, but Luke wasn't satisfied. He grabbed his collar, ready to hit him again. I stood in front of Nathaniel. "Stop hitting him. I was the one who went after him." Luke frowned, losing his temper at me for the first time. "What in the hell are you doing? Getting into a stranger's car like that? Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? What does it matter to you? Besides, this guy is much better than you, at least he has desire for me." "How do you know I don't?" Luke practically shouted the last sentence. Seeing my stunned expression, he immediately regretted it. He closed his eyes, let out a shaky breath, turned his back, and covered his face with his hands. In the hospital corridor, Nathaniel, with ointment applied to his injuries, asked, "Is that the person you like?" I nodded, then shook my head, listlessly telling him not to be so nosy. After a while, I couldn't help but ask, "Tell me, what does it mean when a man clearly has feelings for me but still rejects me?" Nathaniel smiled and pushed up his glasses. "It could be because of low self-esteem, or maybe fear, but there is only one most crucial reason." "What is it?" "Not brave enough." I repeated the phrase to myself and then asked, "So what should I do?" Nathaniel, wiping his glasses, replied casually, "It's simple. If he's not brave enough, find someone who is. Like me." I didn't take the bait, asking him instead what his first love was like. Nathaniel looked up at the hospital ceiling, the back of his head resting against the wall. "She got married. Had a baby earlier this year, and she even invited me to the dinner." I frowned, and asked again, "Do I really look like her?" Nathaniel turned his head to look at me. His eyes behind the frames were still swollen, yet his gaze was unnervingly calm. "No, you don't. Is it my personality then? He shook his head again. His neat, slicked back bangs had fallen onto his forehead, which, ironically, made his features look sharper. I'm just not good at picking up girls. But I don't have a habit of using my lover as a replacement. Lover. I chewed on the word, then asked, Nathaniel, how old are you, really? That word choice is so old-fashioned. You're the one who's too young. A look of helplessness flashed across Nathaniel's face. But I'm younger than that guy, anyway, and I'm a bit taller than him. I rolled my eyes at him and said I liked older men. Nathaniel immediately changed his tune, I just have a young face. He clearly isn't as mature as I am. I finally laughed. Nathaniel sighed in relief. Let's go. I'll take you to eat, and then take you back to your dorm. Tossing and turning on my dorm bed, my roommates were out at an all-night graduation party, leaving me alone in the room. I couldn't stop replaying the confrontation with Luke tonight. When he inadvertently revealed his desire for me, I was actually a little happy. But that happiness was quickly overshadowed by confusion. I asked him why he pushed me away if he liked me, and he stayed silent. I asked why he stopped me from seeing other men if he chose to give up, and he was silent again. It wasn't until I pointed out that he was arrogant and selfish, not only failing to treat me as an equal adult but also condescendingly making decisions for me under the guise of doing what's best for me, that he finally lowered his head and apologized. But I was thoroughly disappointed and left with Nathaniel. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I pulled the covers up, forcing myself to sleep. But then something suddenly came to mind. Crap, my things were still at Luke's place. To win him over, I had consulted my most experienced roommate. She had helped me choose an extremely seductive outfit, along with some accessories that were blush-inducing just to look at. And right now, those things were sitting on Luke's sofa, in a black fabric bag that looked discreet but actually screamed, "Look at me." I paced the dorm twice in a panic, even considering cleaning to distract myself. After much deliberation, I decided to go back and get the items. But when I actually took a taxi and stood in front of his apartment door, I hesitated again, thinking about how to explain my late-night visit and worried he would think I was still clinging to him after being rejected. But unexpectedly, as I debated, I leaned lightly against the doorknob, and the door simply opened. It wasn't locked. I peeked into the dark and empty living room and simply slipped inside, planning to grab my things and run. But surprisingly, the bag wasn't on the sofa. I cautiously searched around, extremely nervous, when I suddenly heard a muffled groan coming from the direction of the bedroom. Luke was home. I jumped in fright, and at the same time, that sound triggered some uncontrollable thoughts. I wanted to see what he was doing. The closer I got to the bedroom, the clearer the sounds became, and the faster my heart pounded. It wasn't until I pushed open the slightly ajar door, using the moonlight from outside the window, that I finally saw the scene inside. The room reeked of alcohol. I had expected to see something R-rated, but Luke was just sitting on the floor, eyes closed, leaning back against the edge of the bed. A knife lay discarded on the floor. It was the first time I had seen him with his sleeves rolled up. His arms were long and lean, but his exposed wrists were covered with ghastly scars of varying depths. Several of them were clearly fresh, still a glaring, bloody color. I gasped. Even though I covered my mouth as quickly as possible, I still startled the person on the floor. But when he opened his eyes and saw me, there was no surprise. Only a kind of bitter resignation, "You're here again. Then can I stop holding back this time in the dream?" He seemed to be asking himself. Then he propped himself up on the floor. The shadow of his broad shoulders and narrow waist gradually closed in until I was completely enveloped by him. I didn't know what he was going to do. I only knew he had lost his usual composure. Strands of hair were messy, plastered to his sweaty temples, and his dark, gleaming eyes held a thick, undiluted desire, dangerous yet irresistible. Professor Luke. I was frightened by his appearance. But he went straight to covering my mouth and leaned down to kiss me. His warm lips traveled from my trembling eyelids, brushed past my cool nose tip, behind my ear, and finally, trailed all the way down my smooth, long neck. First, there were gentle, restrained pecks. My heart was racing astonishingly fast. My breathing was erratic, and my brain felt suddenly empty, all thought evaporating into a mist in that uncontrolled flame. I could only let that unfamiliar, surging thrill completely drown me. My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the doorframe to keep from falling. His large hand wrapped around behind me. His arm tightened, holding me captive in his embrace. I was surrounded by his cool scent and could clearly feel his taut shoulders and his broad, warm chest. With a slight effort, he steadily supported the crook of my knees and my back, lifting me into his arms. I cried out, my body instinctively tensing, but he held me firmly. In a dizzying moment, I was already on the soft bed. Before I could recover from the feeling of weightlessness, his burning body was on top of mine, his chest heaving violently. My heart skipped a beat, and I gripped the bedsheet tightly, my fingertips starting to go numb. But he suddenly braced his arms, pulled away, and his warm fingertips brushed across my cheek, gently tucking my messy hair behind my ear. Then he leaned closer and placed an extremely light kiss on my forehead. When he looked at me, his eyes were focused and reverent, full of tenderness. After a long moment, he finally sighed, lay far away on the other side of the bed, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. My heart didn't settle down for a long time. He was drunk and thought he was dreaming. Should I just leave now and pretend I never came? That would be best. While thinking this, I cautiously moved to the living room. Just my luck, my phone rang. I panicked and hung up, guiltily listening for any movement in the bedroom. Good, he should still be asleep. But as I pushed the door open, ready to leave, a low voice sounded behind me. Are you looking for this? I turned around and saw Luke standing at the bedroom door, his eyes clear and his mind rational. Clutched in his palm was a fuzzy, imitation foxtail, buzzing and swaying seductively. At the same moment, my phone screen lit up. I saw a text message from my roommate. Oh yeah, that electric tail is kinda cheap. It goes off super easily, so remember to take the batteries out when you're not using it. He turned on the living room lights, and only then did I realize it wasn't just the tail. In his other hand, he was holding the maid outfit, and the fuzzy animal-ear headband was clutched in his distinct, bony palm, looking incredibly sexy. My cheeks felt hot. Of course, I wouldn't admit it and changed the subject. Professor, have you been drinking? He stared at me intently, his face showing a mix of hesitation and testing. Did you just arrive? Yeah, why? My calm counter-questions seemed to quell his doubts. He withdrew his scrutinizing gaze, letting it fall back onto the continuously shaking foxtail. Who were you planning to wear this for? His voice was hoarse and low, unbelievably sexy. But his words reminded me of his previous rejection, and I said with a huff, what does it matter to you who I wear it for? It's not for you, anyway. He sensed the defiance in my mood. I don't mean to interfere with you, but you need to learn how to protect yourself. He sighed, deliberately slowing his speech. Men sometimes draw a clear line between love and lust. A momentary attraction might be intense, but it doesn't necessarily contain true feelings. You're too young. You shouldn't use methods like this to test things. He walked toward me, raising a hand as if to gently stroke the top of my head again, but his fingertips curled in the air and ultimately didn't land. Don't let yourself get hurt. It was always like this, high-sounding, self-righteous. I'd heard countless similar lectures from him. Right now, those words were like sparks falling into dry kindling, instantly igniting the accumulated resentment and frustration in my chest. I suddenly wanted to tear apart his facade of composure and see if the same turbulence I felt was hidden beneath that calm exterior. What about you, Professor? I looked up, glaring at him. What are your feelings for me? If I put on this outfit right now and stood in front of you, would you lose control? His pupils instantly contracted. His breath caught in his throat, as if my words had dragged him into some fantastical scenario he dared not dwell on. He instinctively took 2 steps back, avoiding my gaze. It's getting late. I'll take you back to the dorm. I ignored him and pressed on. He kept backing away until his spine was practically against the door frame, and his tone finally hardened. As your teacher, I don't want to say anything too unpleasant. But I thought you at least had some self-respect. My steps halted abruptly. I looked at him in disbelief. The man before me was cold, resistant, and drawing a line with the most detached posture. Completely different from the person who had held me in his arms and cherished me like a precious treasure in the bedroom earlier. A massive sense of absurdity washed over me. I suddenly felt like it wasn't worth it. Forget it, a forced twist is never sweet. I turned to leave, not even bothering to answer when he said, I'll take you. Nathaniel stirred the ice cubes in his cup, making a crisp clinking sound. What if he has some unspoken difficulty? What of it? My eyes were clear. Whether it's an unspoken difficulty or psychological trauma, does it have anything to do with me? I glanced at him. I date for fun, not to play detective and solve a case. If I had such strong curiosity to explore someone's trauma and past, I'd be better off playing immersive theater. At least I'd get a sense of accomplishment when I completed the level. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. I thought girls liked men with stories and wanted to heal them. I looked at him and earnestly advised, stop watching so many melodramas. If you're sick, you should see a psychologist. Dating isn't running a clinic. A few days later, Luke suddenly appeared at my coffee date with Nathaniel. Can I speak with you for a moment? Luke asked me. Let's talk here, Professor. After all, there's nothing between us that needs to be kept private. His expression darkened a bit more. His brow furrowed, and his tone carried a subtle tension. Did you come over very early yesterday, and did you enter my bedroom? The memories from last night rushed back to my mind, and my earlobes faintly burned. I shook my head and denied it. Since I was ready to give up, why create more entanglement? It was better to let him continue to think it was just a dream. I'm sorry, Professor, I said flatly. I'm a person with self-respect, too. At least I don't go back to an old flame. I paused deliberately. Seeing his expression dim and even his shoulders slump a bit, I suddenly changed the subject, unless. I crooked my finger at him. He was startled, instinctively leaning in closer, his warm breath fanning my ear. I looked up and whispered in his ear, in a volume only the two of us could hear. The next second, his eyes widened in shock, his pupils full of astonishment. His earlobes instantly turned bright red, and a flush spread to his neck. I wanted him to wear the maid outfit for me, the kind with the fox tail and animal ears. Luke didn't say a word, but Nathaniel pulled me aside and judged me in a whisper for breaking my word. Didn't you say you didn't care about his difficulties and that he should go see a doctor? What did you say to him? And didn't you say you don't go back to an old flame? He's handsome. Just handsome? I'm pretty handsome, too, aren't I? You are handsome, but you won't commit yourself. I spread my hands helplessly, glancing at his collar button to the very last button. Nathaniel crossed his arms, rolling his eyes at me. Shut up, you female pervert. I looked back and realized Luke had already left. Nathaniel said I deserved it, nagging me to quickly coax him, because only he was still willing to accept a bad woman like me who tried to have two men at once. But as he spoke, he observed my expression carefully, worried that I might be upset. In reality, I didn't care at all. What I said earlier was deliberately meant to provoke him. It was completely expected that someone as rigid and proud as Luke would refuse. I recalled a few years ago when he had just returned to teach in America. Because of his youth, outstanding appearance, and brilliant resume, he quickly became famous at the university. At the time, the school leadership personally invited him to a family dinner, intending to set him up with their only daughter. Their attitude toward him was warm, and they didn't even mind that he had just broken up with his girlfriend of 7 years. He flatly refused. I thought then that he, having lived abroad for a long time, didn't understand the importance of networking with superiors. I explained it to him. He stood behind the podium, listening politely and seriously to my explanation. After I finished, he smiled and said he knew, it's the same all over the world, those in power use marriage to consolidate interests. Then why? I wanted to ask him why he refused, but he shook his head gently. I just believe that a long-term relationship between two people should be based on admiration and love. Even if a relationship is bound to involve interests, it shouldn't be at the very beginning. I'm sorry, I'm a hopeless idealist. He apologized with his mouth, but there was no sign of regret. In all fairness, he was a very good person. But no matter how good a person is, he is not worth me constantly exhausting my energy. I'm busy too. At 10 o'clock at night, I was having dinner with my team members when I suddenly received a text message, "Are you free now?" It was from Luke. I raised an eyebrow and replied, "Maybe." "Are you going to keep your promise?" He tacitly agreed and sent me an address. It wasn't far, but the location was strange, neither his home nor a hotel. I suppressed my confusion and headed over. The moment I pushed the door open, I couldn't help but smile, because Luke, who came to open the door, was strikingly dressed in a black and white maid outfit. The tailoring was tight, and the inherently sweet style was starkly contrasted by his firm muscular lines. He was also wearing a pair of fuzzy animal ear headbands, and the thin bell collar around his neck jingled softly with his movements, yet it did nothing to alleviate his current embarrassment. His earlobes were red as if they were bleeding. Seeing me scrutinize his attire, Luke awkwardly averted his gaze. Was there traffic on the way? Sure enough, people talk about irrelevant things when they're embarrassed. I said, wrong. You should call me master. I raised my hand, wanting to touch the fuzzy animal ears on top of Luke's head. He instinctively tilted his head away, and the bells on his collar emitted a string of flustered chimes. I want to apologize to you. His speech was slightly stammering due to the speed, and his ear tips were suspiciously red. That night, I thought I was dreaming, or else I would never have said those things to you. I want to take back what I said about you having no self-respect, and also about the clothes. You have the right to choose what you wear and who you show it to. I didn't speak, just stared at the animal ears on his head that trembled along with his breathing as he spoke. His knuckles were white from clenching his hands, and his whole body screamed I want to escape, yet he forced himself to stand there. If you've calmed down. His voice was tight. I'll change back into my clothes, and then we can talk, okay? I suddenly closed the distance between us, looking into his abruptly widened pupils, and slightly curved my lips. Professor, it seems you're not very good at the role you're playing. A momentary attraction is indeed passionate, but if it's true affection, why would you be afraid to admit that passion? I fiddled with the golden bell on his collar, lowering my voice, and said slowly, word by word, you've taught me so many great principles. Now it's my turn to teach you a few things, for example, how to please a woman. First. My fingertip traced behind his ear. Seeing his body instantly stiffen, I leaned closer to his ear. You need to learn to relax. The bell jingled again as I played with it, with a delicate, trembling sound. I deliberately slowed my movements, rolling his hot earlobe between my thumb and forefinger, watching the flush slowly spread. See, your body is much more honest than your mouth. It really likes being touched, doesn't it? His Adam's apple bobbed. He tried to say something, but my sudden kiss disrupted his rhythm. I didn't continue, just lightly pecked his trembling lip, like teasing the animal ears that always tried to dodge. Second, remember, pleasing is never a one-sided attempt to curry favor. My finger slid down the collar, feeling the frantic heartbeat in his chest. For example, right now, you're nervous like a little white rabbit afraid of being hunted, but I love seeing you lose control. My hand continued downward. The bell on his neck jingled again, this time mixed with the suppressed gasp that escaped his throat. Last lesson, learn to be honest with your own desires, Professor. I looked up, meeting his slightly flushed eye corners. His eyelashes were wet and trembling, yet his eyes held a ball of scorching light. Seeing Luke about to lose control, my upturned lips showed my triumph. But unexpectedly, he suddenly reached out, wrapping his arms fiercely around my waist, pulling me fully into his embrace. My body unexpectedly pressed against his. The intensely present, woody, cool scent instantly enveloped me. The shift in power happened in an instant. The next second, I was pressed against the wall, my back against the cool surface. The besieged prey had become me. Is this how you? His large hand was still gripping my waist. The pressure wasn't heavy but carried an implicit message that I couldn't break free. Please you? His voice was extremely hoarse, his eyes surging with dark currents, full of aggression. Meeting his fervent gaze again, my heart suddenly accelerated. I belatedly felt a slight fear. His fangs seemed to be hidden deeper than I had imagined. Before I could react, his kiss had landed on my neck. It wasn't a tentative peck but carried the urgency of being repressed for a long time. His teeth occasionally grazed my skin, causing a slight shudder. The animal ears rubbed against my cheek, and the fuzzy sensation instantly drained most of my strength. I think I've learned. When he looked up, the haziness in his eyes was gone, leaving only the surging dark tide. The bells around his neck tinkled. My consciousness felt sucked into a vortex, and even my breathing became scattered fragments adrift. But just as that moment of loss of control was about to completely cross the line, his actions abruptly halted. His voice was still husky with unspent passion. Did you bring your ID? I was a little dazed. My muddled consciousness was pulled out of the vortex. It sluggishly turned half a circle before I could barely focus. What? His Adam's apple rolled. He suppressed the slight tremble in his breath, but his gaze was exceptionally clear. I want to take you to sign the property gift agreement first. What the hell was that about? The heat all over my body hadn't faded, and desire was growing wildly like weeds, leaving no room for logic. But he insisted on turning my face to him, his fingertips showing a cool restraint, as if the person with the scorching breath, on the verge of losing control, wasn't him at all. After he explained, I learned that he had bought me an apartment, this very apartment, downtown, paid in full. My mood interrupted. I frowned at him, my tone strange. Are you buying a house because you want to marry me? He shook his head. No. I checked. Most countries' marital property laws favor community property. I want to transfer it to you as a voluntary gift before marriage. We don't need to get married, but you are so much younger than me. This relationship is inherently unfair to you, so I hope your life can at least have an extra layer of security. The air still held the lingering heat, but every word he spoke now was as serious as a promise. I finally remembered what everyone was chatting about before I left the gathering. Did you know? I heard that after Professor Luke broke up with his girlfriend, she committed suicide. The table fell silent for a moment, then everyone started chattering again. Luke's ex-girlfriend was 5 years younger than him. She had suffered from severe depression a few years ago. The two constantly quarreled and finally broke up after their feelings were completely exhausted. But not long after that, she chose to take her own life. Luke was devastated and only then accepted the special invitation to return to America. I lowered my face and broke free from Luke's embrace. Don't use me as a replacement, and don't try to compensate another woman through me. He was stunned and explained in a panic, you are not anyone's replacement. He was just worried that the gap between us would create psychological pressure, and he didn't want to see me worn down by an unfair relationship, losing my own radiance. He was uncharacteristically flustered, speaking a long string of incoherent words, and then stared at me nervously, his expression helpless. Seeing him like this, I took a half step back. Whether the gap will create pressure is hard to say, but you buying me a house will definitely create problems. Why? He was confused. I could probably guess the reason for the problems in his previous relationship. One was a famous scholar with great achievements and a bright future, whose resume was so dazzling it was hard to look at. The other devoted herself entirely to the family, giving up her own life. Although I didn't know that lady, the societal norms and pressures imposed on women are largely consistent. To be the woman behind a successful man, gentle and thoughtful, diligent in managing the household, yet by secular standards, accomplishing nothing. But this is a product of the entire social structure, which no matter how hard a good man tries, he cannot eliminate. I looked at Luke, this true darling of heaven, and didn't know how to explain, so I just said, because I don't want to marry you at all. And what makes you think there's a gap between us and that you need to condescend to me? I told him I also had my own career. Since my freshman year, I had established an art installation studio with like-minded friends. After several years of meticulous refinement, our last mechanical exhibit in collaboration with an art museum sold for a high price of over 100,000 yuan. Now, as the head of the studio, I was expanding into new markets, and we were preparing to develop our own IP. And Nathaniel's venture capital company was very interested in our studio. That's why we kept in touch even after I first clearly rejected his confession. He was a polite suitor, but even more, a clever businessman. I did like Luke, and to avoid any regret, I purposely stayed at the university for 2 extra weeks after getting my diploma just to pursue him. But my rationality outweighs my emotion. No matter how much I like him, I won't let his existence interfere with my future plans. So I am destined not to enter into marriage. Luke silently listened to my words, then suddenly stared at me and asked, what if I'm willing to quit my job and be the man behind you? I raised an eyebrow, a hint of interest flashing in my eyes. I won't have children for you. He said, that's fine. I don't like children. But even so, I don't want to give you a title yet. That's also fine. The social structure favors men, so you can be a little mean to me. His gaze was fervent and sincere. I was suddenly moved. Perhaps it was time to let go of my obsession and embrace the happiness in front of me. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed his lips. This time, he didn't dodge. The bells on his neck jingled, accompanying our intertwined breaths, composing an ambiguous movement in the silent room. And this time, I believe neither of us will run away again. Because true love never needs a title to prove itself, it only needs 2 brave hearts and a reckless dedication.